Welcome to this section. In this section, we shall be working on designing a shopping list application. The goal behind this application is, as a user, I can add a bunch of items, then edit that item, or perhaps delete it or mark things as being bought or done. For now, the styling won't be as amazing as I would expect it to be. So let's get started. The first step is to initialize or create a bunch of files that we shall use. And we'll definitely need an index file in there. And we'll also need one of the previous jQuery files. So I'll just copy that and move it over to the folder where my shopping list app was created. So I paste here, doesn't allow pasting, so what I'll do is just copy from the file before and copy it in there, so you can see it's there. And lastly, I'll need a simple script called app.js where I'll be storing a bunch of code. So step one, let's create the file. And let's give it a title of shopping list. And you may recall I'm using the Emmet plugin to set this stuff up very fast for me. Okay, and the first step for order is we might design a div, maybe have it contain a form. The action is empty for now, and in here I'll have an input of type text, and I think I can also have the input of type number, and finally I could have a button that says add. Then when I go over here and I right click and say open, or even double clicking, I should see something like that, right? Not so fancy, just a bit simpler. Okay, now let's just make it a little bit easier. Let's provide placeholders. So a placeholder for this could be item, and then maybe the one for number is the amount. So we need an amount, right? So when you refresh, we need an item and an amount. Notice that this thing now has these nice looking widgets. It happens when you set your input as a number. Now the input tag is one way we get stuff from people, and we need to put that inside a form. And right now, when I say I want maybe tomatoes, 15 of them, and I click add, nothing happens. Well, the page just refreshes, but really, we don't get to store anything anywhere. In the future, you'll have a database for this kind of work, but right now, you do not have that. So let's include a jQuery file, so script, we'll need the source, and we'll put the jQuery in there. One small thing you have to notice is that the jQuery.min or whatever file that's jQuery comes before. It doesn't come after. So it has to come before. So that's where we have app.js, right? It follows after. And let's open up app.js. And the first order of action is making sure that it works in a document that is already ready for it. So we do that by typing $, or the query, followed by document, and the word ready, and semicolon. And in there, we'll put a function. The function is just a callback for something that already exists. So this is where our code goes, right? And right now, nothing happens still, so I can keep adding and doing a bunch of weird things. So how do we get these numbers? Any ideas? If you thought jQuery, yes, you're right, we can use jQuery. So let's go over to the developer tools and over that console, and we can query, say, the input, and we'll get just a bunch of inputs, right? Not so helpful for now. We could also use a special syntax. I believe it looks like that. We'll confirm eventually. Yep. We can select or be selective and say we only want input, but the input that we want is of type text. We can also do a corresponding number, right? Number. So that one returns the number here. Okay. Now, what can we do? Let's say we put the item of tomato here and a number of, say, 45. What I could do, let us put 45, and we need to figure out how to get its value. So if I repeat this very code here, and the method for that is the val method, right? Now let's go over to the API documentation for jQuery, right? And then let's work with that. jQuery.com, and then we'll search. We'll search for val method. This VAL method. It's how we get stuff done. And when I press enter, you see the value? It's a string of 45. When I try to do the same thing for the text bit, I will have something different. So let's just change it to that. I'll have tomato. Not so fancy yet, right? So let's create a variable to store these values for us. So we can say var, and let's say item, and then we'll query input that's of type text and save the value there. Let's also get the value of the numbers, or let's say amount of that item. We'll type that, have a type of number, and then, well, you might have noticed I used a single quote here. Well, there's no big difference so long as they're all strings coming in there. And for now, I want to check to see if these values are not empty. And the way we do that is we compare, say if this value here is empty, we can say something like a lot, your item is empty. We also have a small extension called else and if item. Now in this case, let's say amount is also empty. We can say you need an amount. Then we can put an explicit else, meaning, okay, if everything is actually a value that we need, let's design something small. Let's say you want to buy, then I'll do a little bit of concatenation, adding things together. Let's start with amount plus space. We need spaces plus item. So if it's tomatoes, and well, the grammar might be a bit off, but I think you get the point. So let's refresh. So right now the items are empty. So let's say we want tomatoes, and we want 12 of them. So well, it still complains that certain things are empty, right? That's because there's a small part we are missing in this code. And in the previous section, we worked with the listener. We had a button where when we clicked, something happened. So let's put a listener in this button here. And it's slightly different here. So what we'll do is we'll query for a form, and on its submit method, we will pass it a function, callback. It's called, this function can take a simple variable, it's called event. I'll talk about that later on. And the first thing to do is we'll prevent the default actions of this form. Now the form by default is to refresh. Every time we click this, the form refreshes. Now we want to design a page that does not refresh at all. And to do that, we need the prevent default. So that's the thing that does that for us, right? Now, when we try that and we click add, nothing happens. You can see that the screen that initially was refreshing before doesn't refresh. Now, we'll pull this code from below here and we'll just drop it there because that's the best place for it to be. I'll do a bit of editing and there you are. And when I refresh, nothing happens. That weird alert that was coming was because our code was misplaced. It wasn't inside the submit action here. Now I'm going to type, say, oranges, and I want 20 oranges. And now I'll click add. It says you want to buy 20 oranges. Wonderful. But no one wants to work on alerts. Sometimes people just want to see things happen. And that's where another function comes in. This function is known as append. But first, let's look at some different functions. Let's look at the submit function and do a bit of studying about it. So this is the submit. Let's also search for the function append that you're going to look at shortly. And while it loads, let's click submit. Now, my internet is a bit slower, but it will load eventually. I'm going to pause for a bit as it loads. Let's take a look at the submit function. Now, the description behind the submit method is it binds an event handler to the submit JavaScript event or trigger that event on an element. So the event we want to trigger is an alert of some kind, whereby we first test to see if something works or not. There are several shortcuts in JavaScript, and this is a method we'll look at eventually, or you kind of saw it on. There's another one called trigger. Then the classier one is this small example here where we have a form, and whenever the form is submitted, in this case we queried using an ID here instead of just having a form, but both can work. We'll listen to that submit action and then we pass in a function handler. This is what we call the handler. Yeah, the handler is a function that has to be executed every time this event is, clicked. And what it does is it takes an event. The event is a special kind of object, that pertains to things related to the browser, if events are handling and other kind of things. So it kind of communicates with the browser. So now, when this form is submitted, the message is alerted in this case here. This happens prior to the actual submission, so we can cancel the submit action by calling .prevent default on the object or by returning false from our handler. We can trigger the event manually when another element is clicked. So the jQuery API is really written out really well. You can see a bunch of examples. There are several books that you can use as well. And let's continue. Another method I wanted to look at with you was the append method, and I'll just slowly introduce it to you. So imagine we created, say, a UL element. It's as simple as this. Let's just give it a class of items. Conveniently, let's call it items, right? It has nothing in it. When we refresh and we try to inspect the element invisibly, go into the body, the div content, you'll see that items is just empty space. There's nothing there, right? And what we can do is we can use the $sign to query this thing and then say we are looking for the UL with a class of items, yeah, and we want to append to it a list item, say fruit, and when we do that, notice we get some lovely fruit here. We can keep changing. Want to buy shoes, and the circle goes on and on and on, right? So let's use the same logic. Let's query for elements and just add things to it. Yeah, let's do that in jQuery here. So we'll do that in the else part, meaning when there are items involved, we just want to, append something to it. And we'll edit it shortly, but let's just see if it's going to work, right? So let's refresh. Let's add some tomatoes, and let's give it an amount of, say, 50. And we click add, right? They're shoes, right? But we want tomatoes and 45 to show up. So what do? We adjust our code here, and we'll use string manipulation or addition. So let's say we want that item. We'll add that. We'll maybe give it some space and say something like that. Well, I'm just constructing something cool. So I want to construct it in a way that there's an item followed by a space, then a parenthesis, and then in there we add the amount that we need, and then close that parenthesis. And yeah, let's see if it's going to work, right? Let's see. So let's refresh. We add the item, tomatoes, amount 34, and click add. Nice, right? See, tomatoes and 34 the number. And we can keep adding. Strawberries, 20. I pressed enter, so it does the same thing as clicking add. I can keep repeating. Of course, there are certain things we haven't taken care of, like duplicates. So these are certain things you can do in your algorithms. Now, this is annoying, whereby when you add something, there are still things that remain behind, right? Now, to circumvent that, we'll take a look at the input again. So from before we had input, we could query it and get stuff from it. We could query and get the values. This one defaults to the text bit. We can query and maybe stick to the number type and get its value. Okay. Another thing, with this very val function, we could actually pass it an empty string, meaning we pass it nothing. And that, for example, wipes out. Amount no longer exists. We can also try the same thing for the text bit. And voila, it disappears. So let's try adding something else. Some random thing, t. And we can also do it in one sweep. We could say all inputs are wiped out with something empty, okay, using the .val function. And that's it, that wipes out everything. So can we do that here, such that after we've added the item, we wipe out everything? Let's do that just right now. Let's wipe it out. We'll wipe it out with an empty string and save the code and refresh and start to add tomatoes, then 34, click that. You can see it disappears nicely. We can also add a few more things like strawberries, and then maybe 45, and that's it. Now, for your challenge in this exercise, can you figure out a way to design your items such that when we say add something new, like tomatoes, 45, we can also have a link called delete and another link called mark done. Okay, when I refresh, can you design it such that when I click these things here, there's a corresponding deletion, and then when I click mark down, something like a strike through occurs. Now I'm just going to give you a few hints with mark done. So suppose we created another file here and called it styles.css, and maybe gave it a style called strike, a class called strike, And in here, we'll have text decoration, and then line through. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to include this file at the top here, the style sheet, sorry, the link. And then in here, I'm going to say, well, let's include the styles. Then I refresh. Now, I can use a query here. So for now, let me just use the list item. And then what I can do is I can add a class to it. The class is called strike. And it strikes things, right? Pretty convenient. Yeah. Now, can you design a function such that when this trigger here, and this is a click listener, when you click either of these, a class is struck through, meaning I've done this completely. And be sure to check in with your mentor on this and see if you can complete this challenge. Well, thank you, and I hope you enjoyed this.